Welcome to Rock Bottom Wellness. I'm your host, Tiffany Flayton. Today I have with us a breathing expert. Her name is Jillian Rutledge, and she's a breathing specialist, performance coach, and free diving instructor. Her philosophy is if you control your breath, your mind will follow. She's a mentor, experiential educator, and advisor for people on the path of mastery. Her clients say she has a manual for becoming a new human. She would say it's all in the breath. So I can't wait to dive into this. Thank you so much for being here. And I guess I use the words, can't wait to dive into it, and it goes right along with what you do in life. So could you, well, first of all, I just want to say I am looking at your background here in beautiful Hawaii. So it's a much different landscape than where I am here in Minnesota right now anyway. But tell us what you do and how you got into it.
For sure. It's funny to try to do like the elevator version speech, of like what one does, because, so many people, we all have such a vast array of experiences and training these days. But I would say that my very first experience around breathing, and back then I had no idea I would be doing what I do now, was actually with real live dolphins. And through an experience with dolphins, in fact, I've been around dolphins for about 25 years, like directly in contact with dolphins. It's really obvious, and the science tells us that they are a type of conscious breather.
Okay.
And so one of the things that intrigued me is that you ask anyone around the planet, describe to me a dolphin, and they'll say, oh, they're joyful, or they're playful, or they seem like they're thriving. And that's not to say that dolphins don't have struggles and that they aren't, that they don't fight and that they don't have social challenges.
Right.
But just blowing things. Our perspective of dolphins is this, this joyfulness. And I feel that that is somehow connected to this idea of conscious breathing. And so I got really curious about it and just kept following my curiosity. And it led me to other and different ways of breathing. Of course, yoga is a big aspect of conscious breathing.
For sure.
With pranayama. So I began studying yoga to become a yoga teacher, and also spending time with dolphins, wild dolphins, and learning how to be underwater with them, which led me to free diving. And I learned the art and the science, the technique of free diving, and became an instructor, which is a whole other aspect of breathing. And then taking those three things of, conscious breathing of dolphins, of animals, diving, and the yoga perspectives, as well as many other modalities that I've studied, I just began to realize that there's something here for humans to learn about ourselves and about our breathing, and how our breathing tells us so much about our health and well-being.
That's so crazy how it evolved from dolphins and your diving and yoga, all that coming together, and you connecting the dots and how that helps us and how we can learn from it. So what have you learned? How does playing with dolphins for the last, 20, 25 years?
25 years, yeah.
What have you learned from them, and how the conscious breathing, and how does that translate into us and our health and our spiritual, mentally, emotionally, how we function that way? So I'm sure that's a ginormous topic. It's not something that we can cover here in, 45 minutes or whatever, but what would you say, what are you learning from it, and how does that translate into how you help people?
Yeah. So after my first introduction with dolphins and how I began spending time with them was I was a dolphin trainer. And I know that's a controversial thing, but it's actually, there is no but. What happened for me there is what I would call that type of spiritual awakening, and woke up to not only the spirit of the dolphins, but my own consciousness, my own ability to have deep relation with the earth and deep relation with another being. And so, yes, it's a big topic, but I would say the first thing that had me want to learn more about breathing was when I was a dolphin trainer, we had to count their breaths. We would go up every morning and we would just count their breath rate. And that was one way that we could tell information about their health and well-being, was their breath rate. We knew that dolphins breathe so many breaths per minute, and it was just part of our routine. And I think just out of my innate curiosity, to sit there for 5 minutes and just count breathing got a little monotonous. So I started to look for other things. I started to notice other things, other aspects of their breathing that just kept leading me to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, until I had an experience where a dolphin, one of the dolphins, was really showing me her breath. She sat with her head in my lap, breathing. And every time I copied her, she would give me this like, wow, yeah. And then she put her head back down in my lap. And this wasn't a training scenario. This was just hanging out in free time.
Wow, that's amazing.
And there's more to the story than all of that I will share in a book that I'm writing. But what I want to say about it is, this dolphin, her name is Mavis, conveyed to me something that came to me. I mean, I don't know how exactly it all works, how animal communication and all that exactly works. But I know that while I was in her presence, what came to me was that freedom is a state of mind. It's
That's
not
perfect.
so much about our outer circumstances. It's not so much about how we look. It's not so much about how we act. It's a state of mind. And then that state of mind creates our outer circumstances.
Yes, that is so true. You know, when you talk to people, or you learn about their, maybe issues that they're having, and they feel trapped in their situations, in their life situations, and then you get to know them more, and you understand their mindset a little bit, and it goes hand in hand,
Yeah.
sometimes,
and it's not
unfortunately.
To say that, right. And it's not to say that because freedom is a state of mind, let's just put a bunch of animals in captivity. Right. No. But it goes exactly to what you were saying, is that when we're in a circumstance that we feel like we don't have control over, like an illness, mm-hmm. or some mental challenges, mm-hmm. or emotional challenges, we feel that sense of being stuck or being held captive, there is a way out through our mind. And when we control our breath, our mind follows.
Okay, I love that, because many of the people I work with, I'm just saying, for example, one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, their anxiety and depression, and they've been struggling with it for years and years and years and years. And their mindset is that this is their circumstance, this is their plight, their cross to bear, their whatever, that there's no way that it can be different for them. And so if they could be taught by Mavis the dolphin, they can maybe learn that they can, come out of it. And that's where I want to know how you would take someone like that, mm-hmm. or someone in, we could talk about the breath stuff in a second, but, specifically, but how you can take someone like that and help them out of their, struggles. So yes. How do you do that with people, or who is it important for, the people that you focus on?
Yeah. Well, first I want to say is that it's not a black or white situation. Everybody's mm-hmm. unique, and everything is relevant to that person and who they are, and what's going on for them in their lives, and what they're here to learn, and all of those things. So a holistic approach is not just saying, okay, let's just focus on breathing and let's not worry about the physicality of this disease or the physicality of this challenge I'm having. No. Yes, look at it as the mind, body, and spirit, or as a holistic approach of let's take care of the symptoms and the physicality of this issue, but also in a complementary way, look at other aspects that are supportive. Breathing often isn't the answer to the problem, but it gives us access to our wisdom and our healing abilities.
So how do you set someone up with dealing with their breath? How do you, if they're maybe doing a lot of other modalities and trying to work through whatever their situation is, where does breath come in and how do you start them on that?
Yeah. So obviously we breathe with everything we do. I mean, even
Mm-hmm.
as a breath hold diver, I have to breathe a certain way to prepare for a breath hold.
Okay.
So we have to breathe with absolutely everything we want to do. And so what I like to do is look at, how is your everyday breathing, the breath that you take with everything that you do. And it's different depending on your heart rates. You know, if you're doing something aerobic, you're going to have a different breath rate and a different breath rhythm. But I look at all of that. And in a way, it kind of sounds a little romantic, but I'm listening to the breathing, not just the sound of the breathing,
Mm-hmm.
but what is this breath? What is your breath communicating based on how it's moving in the body and some of the details. So there's an evaluation process for sure. And then looking at, what are some of your beliefs? What are some of your beliefs about what's going on for you? What are some of your beliefs about overcoming this? What are some of your beliefs around, and finding where it matches with how they're breathing.
Okay.
And then looking at, is there room for change? And to be even more specific, the first thing I do is evaluate their breathing and then teach them some techniques to open up their breathing so that they are breathing a little bit more and efficiently. Because, for instance, in a lot of different classes and modalities, let's say yoga, for example, or meditation, we'll hear someone say, okay, go ahead and take a deep breath in to start off. And this is amazing. This is perfect instruction. However, most people's version of a deep breath in looks like this. And although that's better than a shallow breath, it's still not a deep breath. It's a bigger breath, but a deep breath is one that is really in the body, that it's utilizing not just the lung capacity in terms of size, but also in terms of efficiency. Because if we're breathing deep, but we're using a lot of energy to take in that deep breath, we're kind of countering it.
Sure.
So there's a lot to breathing than meets the eye. And that's why I guess what intrigued me about becoming a breathing specialist, because I was thinking, why is it that we all know a lot more about the mechanics of our car and how our cars run than our own bodies? And in particular, our breathing, which is where a good portion of our life force energy is generated.
That's really interesting, because I know over the years of doing different types of yoga or even just other fitness classes that aren't, specific to breathing, there is that, okay, you take a couple deep breaths at the, when you're warming up and when you're cooling down, and there's no explanation to it. It's just something you do. You don't even think about it. You just do it because the instructor tells you to do so. And so it's really interesting that we can, if it's more purposeful and it's for a purpose, for a specific reason, according to what's going on with us or how we're feeling and how we're perceiving our situation, that you can help people come out of it. So what are some of the things that you see people doing as far as improving their symptoms? Like how does it manifest an improvement, or how does the improvement of breathing manifest?
Yeah, and it's amazing because it doesn't take much to start sort of a domino or a spiraling effect. And I just want to say that anybody who teaches a yoga or fitness class that says take a deep breath in, this is amazing still, right? Mm-hmm. There's nothing absolutely wrong with that.
Right.
What I'm saying is that you can take it to a whole other level if you wish, if you feel called, if you want to dial in to the very foundation of our life force energy. It's the breath. After that, it's the energy.
Okay.
And for some people, delving into energy is a little not grounded enough for them. So there's where you can work with your breathing, because they are synergistic. They are woven together.
Sure.
So thinking back to your question, and in particular, what kinds of things do I see improve? First and foremost, it's just learning to relax your body. And then slowly unwind in a way that's unique to that person from survival mode. Because even when we don't think we're in survival mode, we are.
Yeah, it's like it's how our society functions, kind of.
for the most part, and again, that's a generalization, not everyone is, and not everyone is all the time, but and it's not to say that stress is bad. We need some pressure in order to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, how are we dealing with it? How are we dealing with the stress and the pressures in our lives? And so what the statistics are telling us is that people are amped up, that people are living in their adrenal glands are struggling, and their cortisol is up skyrocketing.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, one of the first improvements that people have with a deeper, more efficient breath is another level of relaxation they didn't even know they had access to. And it's kind of what has them not want to meditate or not want to exercise, because they didn't realize they actually could just, whoa.
Sorry.
And they didn't, that's okay. They didn't realize that they could come home to their body and feel good in their body just by dialing it back a little and relaxing. And that's just a tiny little step. I mean, a lot of times people get a practice going of regular full breathing, and suddenly they're in this like full on relaxation that
right.
they never even dreamed was possible for them.
Right.
So relaxation is for sure step one.
That's
step
huge.
2 is it is huge. it's and it goes hand in hand with where I was going to say step 2, and it's not really steps. They don't happen linearly.
Right.
But it's the sense of coming home in your body, coming into your body, feeling yourself in your body, grounding through your body. There's a lot of different terminology for it, but what my clients would say is, I just feel like I'm centered. I feel like I'm not so much out here, I'm in here.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people might even call that being more heart-centered, because they're in here and they're not so focused on the outside world. And what starts to happen is we start to care less about our image. We start to care less about what other people think of us. And maybe care less isn't accurate. It's, we stop letting that be the driving force or the motivator
Sure.
for ourselves. We start being motivated from within. And I find the metaphor is so interesting, because where do our lungs sit?
Mm-hmm.
Right on either side of our heart.
Yes.
So we take this breath in, this journey from our head to our heart with every breath.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's an accident.
Nope.
I think that energetically we're bringing life force from our mind to our heart, into our bodies, into this experience of being a spirit, having a human experience.
That is, I mean, those two things I talk about all the time, as far as the relaxation, the self-care, and, to your point, there's no mistake on the placement of the organs in our body, for sure.
Yeah.
It's pretty, our bodies are pretty amazing at how they're designed. It's unbelievable and kind of unfathomable at times,
right?
when you really sit and think about it. So relaxation, and I think of it as self-care. If you're learning to breathe deep and go inward, because and right now, during all the stuff that this world is going through, I think we're sort of all forced into it. So that's one good thing that's happening right now for people. And I think it's just really important to impress upon people to take that time and to learn how to do that now and forever, to be able to kind of go inward with your breath, like you said, and become more centered. So,
and it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. Like, I have a 12-week program, and that's a deep dive.
mm-hmm.
But it doesn't take 12 weeks to just slightly tune into our breathing. And, breath coaching is becoming a thing. Like, it's really becoming a thing. And why it has an impact is because when we start breathing and we start slowing down, we start tapping into painful parts of ourselves, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain,
mm-hmm.
Mental pain. There's some pain there. And isn't it just awesome if we can go through that with someone that we trust, someone
mm-hmm.
that will guide us, somebody that will hold us accountable, somebody that will just be there with us. And although, yes, we have friends and family, sometimes we need someone that isn't biased, someone
right.
that isn't going to coddle us or pity us. We need someone that's going to empower us.
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
it's that thing where sometimes it sounds like it's one of those things that people don't know they need it until they've somehow gone through it.
Yeah.
And I guess I look at, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, um, off air, but I always have been told I'm a shallow breather. And so I'm guessing that that's not terribly uncommon. So can you speak to that a little bit about why that might be, and maybe some reasons for it, and things to combat that or to change that?
Yeah. So, you know, there are, again, generalizations that are a great starting place
Sure.
for looking at why we breathe certain ways. And then there's the unique one-on-one of really, diving into a conversation with you and evaluating your breathing. But to just come from that sort of, here's in general, when we shallow breathe, it's generally out of anxiety, and then it causes anxiety. And we know anxiety is super prevalent on the planet right now for a lot of people. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people live with either low or high levels of anxiety. And it's, the philosophy is how we breathe is how we think, which is then how we act, how we behave. And so it's not to say that shallow breathing means that you're a shallow thinker, but that anxiety that's causing shallow breathing makes it really hard to go deeper,
Mm-hmm.
to meditate, to sit in stillness, to be willing to sit down and listen to your own breathing, because that anxiety is there that kind of wants us to move.
Mm-hmm.
That anxiety often has us distract ourselves and soothe ourselves or cope. We'll procrastinate. Basically, it's the actual effect of fight, flight, freeze.
Mm-hmm.
We say these words, fight, flight, freeze, but we're not talking like there's a tiger chasing you, fight, flight, freeze. We're talking about, how does freeze show up? Procrastination,
Mm-hmm.
avoidance.
Analysis by paralysis, or paralysis by
Yeah,
analysis, kind of thing. Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
How does fight show up? Overthinking, resistance, arguing, being argumentative, or angry. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like we just show up like we want to fight off something. It shows up kind of sneakily in the back door, where it's our behavior, and we don't realize that actually if we opened up our breathing a little more, a lot of that would work its way out. So for example, with you as a shallow breather, I wouldn't just force you into deep breathing,
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of going against what's happening right now. What we would do is look at what's happening for you with shallow breathing, and let's see, what does your breath want to do as you relax.
Okay, and work with
We,
it.
yeah, and we'd look at what helps you relax. Maybe sitting still is not relaxing for you because the anxiety is there. Maybe walking is. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
getting a massage. And that's where it dives into more of what's unique to you.
Sure.
But the idea is, let's help you relax. Let's help you take some of that energy that's all out here and get it back in here. And then let's see what your breath wants to do. 99% of the time, the breath will slow down simply by tuning into the breath. I mean, we can do all kinds of breath, conscious breathing, but most of the time, the first sense of relaxation for people is just when they start listening to their own breathing.
That's interesting. I mean, all of this is so interesting, and it's crazy kind of the things you touched on, where how it can manifest if you are a shallow breather. I'm like, oh, I guess everybody knows what's going on with me. You touched on a lot of things that totally make sense, where,
Right.
overthinking, things like that. And I think that is something that's very common for people, or procrastination, or, not moving forward on something, hesitation. And we think we internalize it differently. I think
Yeah.
we don't really get into it, what's really causing it. And so, how do people even recognize that, oh, my shallow breathing must be because I am, some things we just talked about. And so to seek you out, like, what changes for someone to be able to decide, I need to speak to a breathing coach?
Yeah. I think if you're experiencing any challenge, and especially a challenge that you have not been able to overcome, it's been some time, and it's just like you don't feel like you're making progress, I would get with a breath coach, because as a complementary to what you're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because chances are, if you improve your breathing, whatever else it is you're doing, let's say weight loss, for example, so much science is coming out right now around how weight is shed through breathing. And you think, how does that happen? Well, 70% of our excretion is through our exhale.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to actually excrete something, the toxins that are held in the fat in our body, and some of the challenges why it's hard to lose weight, involve your breathing with your weight loss program, and you will be so surprised at the progress you make. And so that's one example of how you already are breathing with whatever it is you're doing to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Why not take a moment to invest in the breathing, that very foundational aspect of being in a human body and being alive?
Right. It's just that awareness of that it's a thing. And like you said, more and more people are becoming breathing coaches, or people are seeking out breathing coaches. That's amazing. Another
Or
modality.
involving breathing in their therapy. I mean, so many therapists
Mm-hmm.
are even involving breathing in their therapy now, which is awesome. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but
No,
I just
that's
wanted
fine.
to jump in and say,
Yeah.
most of the time, by the time you have a breathing challenge, it's not that it's too late. I wasn't going to say that, but it's like, it's not so much that you need to change your breathing because you have a breathing problem. Don't wait till you have a breathing problem.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wait till your asthma is bothering you so bad. If you have a challenge in life, take a few breath sessions with a coach or an instructor. I'm not the only one. I'd love
Mm-hmm.
it if people, I love to work with people, and I'm not the only one out there. And
Sure.
find what resonates for you. Find the human being that just does it for you, and take some lessons on breathing. Some people do it through singing, voice lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Some people do it through pranayama, through yoga, tai chi. I mean, there's so many modalities. There's rebirthing. It's a lot of different ways to learn about your breathing. My style is that I like to look at our functional breathing, our everyday breathing. And how can we make every breath count? How can we make every breath be the difference for us?
I love
So
that,
that's
because
where
I feel like the functional breathing is a way that probably resonates with a ton of people. People can wrap their brain around that with regard to just, everyday function, getting through your job, your, workouts, or whatever it is. And so what do you have, or could you list like a couple things or 3 things that people could start doing now, working on their own before they need to work with a coach? Or is there anything they could start?
Absolutely. Love to share something, because it's something we already naturally do.
Okay.
And it's yawning.
Oh, okay.
And there is a whole stack of wisdom behind why we yawn. And we could have a whole other podcast on yawning.
Just yawning.
But the gist of it is that it's a amazing release. And even just do a yawn. You're stretching out your jaw. You're mobilizing what maybe where you were holding a lot of tension. When we don't feel safe,
clench.
Right? Let's hold on.
Yep.
And what are we all kind of doing right now? We're all kind of just waiting, holding on. When is this going to be over? Right?
Yes.
When we yawn, our society, Western society anyways, we've been taught that yawning is so rude. And of course, let's be smart about yawning. But yawning is a super great way to just get that overall release in our body. And another version of yawning is sighing. And when we do that, it's like hitting the reset, because what's been happening is tension's been building. And then all of a sudden we go, and we release all of it.
Right.
And you giggle, and I giggle too, because it's so funny to see, because we're not supposed to yawn. But anybody who's listening, do a few yawns and see how you feel.
You'll know.
Like
Yeah.
I already have like all these goosebumpy feelings happening all through here.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I'm speaking to you, my muscles in my neck are kind of like, I'm excited. I'm happy to be sharing, and I love sharing about breathing. So I'm kind of up,
Yeah.
right? But I just yawned, and all these muscles released and gave me the goosebumps.
Right. Wow. I never thought of it that way, but you're right. We're kind of conditioned that, it would be rude to someone. We think we're bored or whatever. So we need to think about the benefits of it as well. So
yeah, I mean, it might not be appropriate to be sitting next to someone in a cubicle and just, big wide open yawn, especially right now. But
right.
Cover your mouth or yawn this way, but like really get that yawn going and let it
Mm-hmm.
release the jaw muscles.
Yeah. So is there anything to it that yawns are contagious? Because I swear when you did that, then I did that. Is there actual research on that?
There is. There's a load of
funny.
research. Anyone Google it. You will get the research. It's amazing. I mean, lots of things. Smiles are contagious.
Mm-hmm.
It's those mirroring neurons, but it's also that, even when animals yawn, it sets off a contagious reaction between the animals.
Mm-hmm.
And in the animal world, in the animal training world or the animal behavior world, we call them calming signals.
Okay.
We know that when animals are yawning, they're calming themselves down. It can mean that they're stressed. It can be a signal that they're stressed, especially, you hear a dog and a dog will be like, "Hoo!" and they're making this little sound. It might be that stress is amped up, but it's also they're trying to figure out how to calm down.
Right. Wow.
It's the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system working itself out.
Mm-hmm. All these different ways to balance those systems for sure. Yeah. So how do you work with people? I mean, you're on a beautiful island, how do people access you, or how do you work with them?
Yeah. Probably 6 years ago, I found a knack for working with people online. And back then we didn't have this amazing app called Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
There was FaceTime and Skype. And I just found that I could really connect and work with people online. And of course, not everybody enjoys that method. Now we're kind of being forced to.
Sure.
But it just became the method that worked really well for me. And eventually it expanded, my business expanded into having international clients. And so yes, the work is online. It is via a video conferencing setup.
Okay.
But what's amazing is I'm not just looking, I don't need to smell your breathing or hear your breathing per se. I mean, that's helpful. And I will ask people for that, but it's actually your overall beingness that's telling me a lot about what's going on for you. And it's not that I walk around evaluating everybody, because that's exhausting. But in a session itself, it's a combination of looking at your breathing, evaluating your breathing, going into a breathing practice and developing a breathing practice, and then combining that with, I guess, a style of life coaching. Okay. And I've aimed more into performance coaching because I'm looking at people who really want to master what they're up to in life. That doesn't mean that I'm not interested in working with people who have diabetes, and that's what they're up to mastering, is a healthy lifestyle for themselves. I work with moms who are into mastering self-care while they have 3 children.
Right. So
that's a feat. This isn't about the high power executive or the athlete, although that is my clientele as well.
Okay. So you work with many people, it sounds like, not just one group of people.
No, I mean, over the years, I've worked with a lot of people. In this moment in time, I seem to be working with a lot of athletes and business entrepreneurs and CEOs. But last year this story is so near and dear to my heart. I had a mom who had a child who was struggling to breathe, and she contacted me because she wanted to know if I could help her 4-year-old breathe. Okay. And I thought, I don't know about video sessions with a 4-year-old. I don't know how effective that will be. And as her and I were conversing, I was recognizing that maybe she would benefit from the work, and then she could pass that on to her children through her own self journey, her own self work. And, with some of my athletes, the outcomes is they win a race, they win the championship, they win whatever. those are wins.
Mm-hmm.
With this mom, at the end of her sessions, she did a 12-week session. She phones me from a museum or messages me from a museum and says, we've been here for 3 hours and nobody's had a meltdown.
Wow, that's huge.
And
That's huge.
meltdowns in their household were happening daily, if not, every couple of hours between the 4 of them in their family with 2 young boys. And she's like, she was ecstatic about
Sure.
3 hours at a museum. And like, to me, that's a win.
That's a huge win. That's a very huge win. Wow. Yeah. A 4-year-old at a museum for 3 hours. That's pretty impressive. So do you find with regard to people struggling, since my people I work with are struggling with kind of chronic health condition typically,
Yeah.
what is the typical chronic health condition people reach out to you for?
Yeah, well, it's funny because it's usually not a condition. It's usually because they've tried everything and nothing's working.
Yeah.
They've tried yoga, they've tried holistic naturopaths, they've tried massage, they've tried so many different things and it just doesn't seem to be sticking.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem to be working. It doesn't seem to be making the difference. And I'm not saying it's because those things weren't working. It's that they needed to go deeper. They needed to get right down to the foundation of their life force energy. And the best friend of our life force energy is our breath.
Mm-hmm. So it's people that are dealing with things that are they're just not getting things totally resolved. They may have made improvements. They may have gotten a lot of relief, but it's just not quite to the level they want to get to.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it has to do with habits and habitual ways of being. And we breathe in a habitual way, and usually it's dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
So when whatever it is that they're working on for themselves, so if they do have a chronic disease and they have, a medical team of people that they're working with, when they pair it with breathing, a lot changes. One, because they just learn to relax. And inside that relaxation, the body starts to heal.
That's so beautiful. I love that. All right. Well, so how can people access you? How can they look into what you do in your programs?
Yeah. So I would say the most effective way is to reach out to me via email.
Okay.
I know email kind of gets archaic nowadays.
Yeah.
And it's all like messaging and Insta stuff. But I would say to reach out to me via email, and that is JILLIH2O, as in the small letter H, the number 2, and the small letter O, at gmail.com.
Okay, perfect.
And, tell me a little bit about yourself and why breathing is why you're interested in breathing. And what we'll do is a discovery session.
Okay.
And we can look at really easily what's going on with your breathing in that session, and how your breathing is being affected by, let's say, fear, for example, in particular, and how you can actually utilize your breathing to step into courage.
Perfect. So they can email you, tell you kind of the gist of what's going on with them, and then schedule a discovery session. And those are like a 30-minute type of call, or is that something?
Honestly,
30?
I would like to say they're 30,
yeah.
And they usually end up being whatever they need to be.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get what that means. All right. Was there anything else that you would like to share or fill in or touch on that we didn't really get to, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think it's just a little bit of what I just touched on, and that is, in this time and space, this isn't necessarily that we need heroes. It's that we need people to go within, to tune into themselves, to tune into their own personal courage, and help themselves and their immediate family work through this together. And one of the most intimate ways that we can develop relationship with ourselves is through our breathing. So even if you never hire a breath coach, to just take a few breaths before you go to bed at night, tapping into that life force energy that's flowing through you.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's perfect. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And I'd love to have you come back on and talk about breathing for weight loss and some of the other things that we touched on that we didn't have time to. But thank you so much. And for everybody else, until next time, eat well, and be well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany.